All right, welcome back to another episode of the Supply Chaney podcast. I am your host, Nathan Chaney, and today we're talking with Bill with Surgere, who I had the pleasure of meeting some of his team at the CACNP Edge conference in Nashville, and that conversation led to this conversation today that I'm really excited to be bringing to you and sharing a founder and a startup story and talk a little about technology and supply chain. So, Bill, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. Well, first of all, it's great to be with you, Nathan. And I would offer this, if I may, to kind of get this started,
Let's get it started.
is that this is happening, this conversation is happening during a time where we're announcing a new CEO at the company, and I'm moving up to an executive chairman role, primarily due to the growth of the company and a lot of things we're going through, which has been very introspective to me, if you can imagine, right? It
Sure.
takes us back to the original beginnings of the company where we literally started around the kitchen table.
I
And
love those kind of stories. Love those kind of stories.
it's so true. And we grew to a point, I looked for five of the smartest people that I could find at the time in supply chain and brought one in from India, one in from England, one from Virginia. And we had a group of very challenging minds around the kitchen table. Supply chain wasn't at that point in time really part of everyone's vernacular, right? It was just really starting to catch on. And so we felt our job was initially to educate
Hmm.
and it kind of spread the word that it will change everyone's lives. And so we started in a if you will a consulting role,
Yep. Yep.
and then today when you talk about startups, we are really a technology company. I think everybody knows us today as in the technology space, particularly IoT, and where that touches the entire end-to-end supply chain. So it is kind of a conversation today between you and me about startups for sure.
Hmm.
And I've been thinking a lot lately about the kitchen table, I have to say.
Let's rewind just a bit more before we start going into IoT and BLE and DVD and
Sure.
all these acronyms and things.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about that first kitchen table. Tell us a little about those formative years.
Yeah, well, the way it all started was that I was at the time president of a fairly large software company that's based in San Diego. International Paper was one of our clients, and they were struggling with how they were going to forecast production. And what they were really hoping to do was to make a connection into the user community that was buying rolls of paper that they would then corrugate and print and cut and those types of functions to put, if you will, corrugate boxes into the supply stream. And it's really interesting because at the time, there were no conversations in the marketplace about how to connect. It just wasn't something that people really expected to do, although they were suffering the consequences of not connecting. And I reached out to our board of directors at the time and said, look, I know that this it doesn't necessarily fit our focus, but wouldn't it be great if we jumped out ahead of the game because this is going to be a big deal. And the board of directors basically said, hey, that's really cool, but no, thank you.
That happens from
So,
time to time.
and frankly, I don't really blame them. It was early, it had risk, and it was unproven, and I think they made a sound decision. But the result of that meeting was that I asked if I could just go do it on my own, and they approved, and so I landed at our kitchen table.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people that start up businesses, the first thing you do is you go get a second mortgage on your house. You spend, all the savings that you have for your kids to go to college. And after you do that, you tell your wife you're starting this new business, and try to hang on, right? But you kind of jump out the door and look for the parachute and then tell everybody that you jumped out the door. Because you kind of, most founders that I've talked to really want to make sure that they're testing their theories in the market,
Hmm.
all of those types of things before you kind of get over committed.
Yeah, you want to take a calculated risk, right? Kind of dip your toe in the water a little bit first.
Well, you really do. And we were really fortunate immediately when we started. What we thought was we would look for mid-cap companies so that we would fine-tune our business case and do all the things that they teach you in business school. And within 30 days of starting, we were called by the Timken company and asked if we would represent packaging as they began their design and deployment for SAP. And we were there for 2.5 years. We never had even talked to a mid-cap company because we went from Timken to Alcoa
Hmm.
to Best Buy to Ford, and we were on our way and had yet to even go back because we were so busy. We didn't even go back to look at the business plan and the case and all that.
Yeah.
All that went out the window,
Right,
and we
right.
just we just started responding to business at that point. But we were really in those days all about packaging consulting and how to think of the supply chain in a packaging concept, because packaging, if you will, represents a lot of the transportation of raw material and finished goods and those things. So that was kind of the launch pad, and we were busy for a number of years and really kind of never had to look back. We never had to get a third mortgage. We never had to kind of live off of credit cards for a while like a lot of people will do. We were very fortunate that the market was ready to embrace the beginnings of supply chain. And if you think about it, in roughly 2018, the same thing happened when Whirlpool asked us to help them convert from corrugate over to reusable containers.
Hmm.
And we did that, but we also at the time provided them with about $16 million worth of reusable containers and racks to support that. And both Whirlpool, we, and the bank wanted to make sure that everybody knew where everything was, right? Because the assets needed to be accounted for. And quite frankly, that got us into the software business. All of a sudden, we moved from consulting into software because once again, the market just simply demanded it. And at the time, there weren't a lot of options for Whirlpool to draw on. So we became a software company. And at that point, I was giving a number of speeches around the country about the dynamics of supply chain, what was happening, who was embracing it, and what the formation of that started to look like in industry. And we got a call from Johnson Controls. And Johnson Controls said, basically, we agree with everything that you've said. We're aligned, and we've heard about what Whirlpool's doing. We want that, except that we're not going to have manual input. So we literally lived in a warehouse with Johnson Controls for over a year testing what was the beginning of IoT data capture. And as most folks know, with reusable containers, the scale, just the sheer number of containers that you have to track along a number of different locations, really you're in passive RFID territory. And so we were on a dock in a warehouse running containers with different tags, different IoT collection devices until we got to 99.9% accuracy. And at that point, we launched Johnson Controls. And really, that was our second start.
Yeah.
We were literally starting a technology company at that point. We peeled consulting off. We turned into a software company focused on supply chain, and we found ourselves getting pretty darn good at using all of the different IoT technology, and we're now layering them together. Now, because we're dealing with about 15 billion transactions a month through our clients, one of the things that we've learned is that the data is so overwhelming that our user base is finding themselves continually behind. There's just so much information to synthesize, analyze, move on it that that it opened the door for us to also become an AI company. So we're taking now all of the data that's being generated from our IoT sensors, and we're putting it through a agentic AI tool that will reflect, if you will, on all of the data that's being created from transactions. So that transaction might be, we see these parts coming in, we see these parts leaving the supplier, we see this amount of material in the warehouse, we see this amount of material going through manufacturing, we see these finished goods going out the back door. We compile all of that, and generally we expected the supply chain folks to be able to understand the dynamic well enough that they would be able to move on the data themselves, right? Self-analyze, if you will. And as I said, it's just overwhelming. So now that we're using agentic AI, what we're doing is we're delivering to our clients analysis that is in real time that tells them what's happening and what they should do. And so it removes that pretty heavy burden, frankly, off of their shoulders so that you have a digital coworker that's doing all the analysis for you. So I go back to your original question, and I have been thinking about this a fair bit lately because of our new CEO. And we've really gone through a number of startups. We started as a consultant company. We then started as a supply chain management software company. We became an IoT company, and now really all of that is supporting an AI presence. So Nathan, I think we must like that record because we keep playing it over and over and over again.
Sure, sure. Well, I think it goes to say and talk about, the leadership that's making the decisions to stay current and stay relevant and provide, the solutions of the time rather than staying with your original one or two solutions that you provided many years ago and just stay in that sandbox, right? You've continually innovated and brought the solutions that your customers need based on the technology that's capable at the time. So that's pretty inspirational. What I would like to do is take a step back. You brought up business school a while ago, and business degree. And so what I'd like to do is travel back a few more steps and understand the school. What did you think you were gonna do? What did you study? What were your initial sort of aspirations in your career? So that we can kind of try to make this connection about what was Bill in the college days and how did we get to where we are today?
Thinking back on it, actually, my story is a series of failures, really. My father owned a medical clinic and had a corner office waiting for me to get out of medical school. But I got about into my sophomore year and got a C in organic chemistry. And so that was the end of that dream for him, right? And through a series of mistakes, I ended up in the military. And at first, it was still during Vietnam at the time, and a lot of lessons that came through Ranger School and a lot of things that I was able to go through, I still use those today. And so It was a failure in organic chemistry, if you will, but it led me into a path that I think that if you look at our meetings and the way that we look at our company, in a lot of ways, those leadership principles were born out of those few years in the military. So I was actually very lucky that I was put into that crucible
Yeah.
because we still lead the company in many ways about how to make decisions and how to consider status and what you do to move forward. And so really it was a point of failure leading to a little bit of success. And the same thing is true as I started to build my career. I was looking for um, a lot of things, and I was able to work for some wonderful companies like IIT and Honeywell and Caterpillar, and some of those folks that gave me the opportunity to expand into international business. And they were the ones that paid for my time at Northwestern, right?
Right.
Where now I'm in business school and I'm learning and learning. But at no point did I go really deep into the executive suites in those companies. It just wasn't working the way that I was really hoping for. So in many ways you might think of that as points of failure too, right? But I walked away from all of that with quite an education, not only at
Certainly.
Northwestern, but I learned from some of the best folks that I have ever met. And so it was a positioning statement rather than a look at, I'm going to spend 20 years and move up into a
Right.
suite or the seventh floor. It just wasn't working that way. So when I was finally asked to become president of a software company in San Diego, it was the same thing. It was preparing me to better understand the different aspects of business, whether it's finance or whatever it might be. And when supply chain came along, my background of many various parts of the business kind of all came together with international paper. And it was that succession, if you will, of failures that kind of put me into the chair around our kitchen table, knowing enough about where business problems reside, what the supply chain was going to do to support the solutions that people were looking for. And and I often look back and think that, thank goodness that I didn't get plugged into the wall and just stay there, right?
Yep. Yep.
I really needed the inspiration of all of those leaders. I really needed the education on what was happening in transportation and manufacturing and all of those different areas. And it supported the launch of our company. And so I look back at it in grateful recognition of what they gave me. The succession of failures, the strengthening that came from that, Nathan, was incredible. And I look at it as maybe the cornerstone of why we were able to launch the company.
I 100% subscribe to that concept. I find myself following a very similar path of I'm kind of like saying calling it ping ponging kind of through the supply chain, different roles, different parts of it. And when I'm talking to students today that are asking me for advice on taking their first job and how do I approach my career, and I typically say there's two primary sort of approaches that I've seen people take, which is the ping pong approach and get a wide variety of experiences. I wouldn't call them failures, right? It's collecting experiences and seeing cultures and way one company works versus how another company works, and being able to go create your own cocktail a little bit later on, taking all the best things that you've taken away from all those experiences. So I don't think failure is the right word to pin to those experiences, because it allowed you to have the what you have today to be able to build on. So I think that's awesome. And like I said, I'm walking a very similar path. You were preaching to the choir here a second ago.
Don't you find in many cases that the fact of the matter is life kicks in? And that's true whether you spend your career at a company, life kicks in and you have no idea really where opportunities may come up and present themselves for growth in whatever area. It is, at the end of the day, the opportunity to kind of judge where you are and what you love, and then how to follow that through what life is bringing you. And for me, it was a little bit like ping pong. And actually, I'm going to steal that thought from you, as well as the one about cocktail, because the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, we are kind of a cocktail, aren't we?
And certainly, yeah, of, we are the cumulative effect of all the experiences and things that we've done throughout our lifetime and
Yeah.
what we've experienced, right? Sometimes I refer to it as a casserole. It depends whether you like drinking or you like, that feel good homemade food kind of stuff. What's your preference? So you talked a moment ago about a series of failures as you see them. Can you talk a little bit about one of the highlights or peaks of your career?
Well, I would suggest maybe what it is, it's a subject matter, right? What we've been able to do is to be embraced by some very challenging, forward thinking companies that have brought us on board with a vision in mind. We have never, at the time that I've been with the company, and that goes back to the kitchen table, right? During all of our years, we have never signed up for a job, if you will, that was either static or tightly defined with a check that came after, and someone would say, great job, way to go. Literally from the very beginning, what we've really been very blessed at having are clients that bring us on board and they say, hey, look, we got to get from here to there. And we're both going to learn how to do that along the way. And they end up stretching us in areas that we never really saw in the crystal ball. Always ask, where is the wisdom that you have, or what is the brilliance that you can share about launching and building a company to what Surgere is today? And I look at it and I have to tell you, it was two things. First of all, it was the wisdom of our clients, not us. And it was just good listening on our part and the willingness to not only embrace the challenge, but invest in it too. So I kind of look at it and I go back to the very early days, the first days with Timken. We parachuted 5 people in there and learned a lot about the normalization of packaging, which was also kind of an unheard of thing, and how to start thinking about packaging relative to data and how we might take that data and then put it into an SAP environment. That's not where we came from, but we knew what they wanted to have happen and we got them there. And so I kind of think of really there wasn't a moment. There's been a succession of moments, whether it was Timken or, thank goodness for Whirlpool that said, oh, by the way, we need you to bring in $16 million worth of packaging when you convert us from corrugate to reusable containers. It was a wonderful thought to begin with, because when we did that, we had to have enough time that we could think of how we're going to deliver the parts to the line, how the suppliers were going to be able to use reusable containers when they've been used to using corrugate. That whole transformation process was very complex. But really, if you think about it, since we were ready to embrace that challenge, and we were ready to go on that, it was them saying, bring $16 million worth of product with you, and we're going to use that to launch the program, that turned us into a software company. It was Johnson Controls that said, yeah, that's all great, but we're not going to do this manually. you need to become now an IoT company, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't share the name right now, but we have the very beginnings of a relationship with one of the world's largest food and beverage companies. And they're doing the same thing. They see the future of intelligent vehicles who not only will tell you where they are, but what's in them and what then the driver takes to deliver and error proof that, and then act as a communication hub and integrate with other systems. We're not doing that today. But by the time we're done, we will have delivered an intelligent delivery vehicle that performs that error proofing and optimizes the management of product delivery. Well, that's kind of, I think, back to that original question of yours. If we listen to the clients, then it's going to be a series of moments where we put another tick on the wall that says, well, we are now different, we are now more learned, we are wiser, and we keep going down the path.
I think there's some common thread through a lot of what you've said so far in this conversation that I'd like to touch on and explore a little bit more, which is the fact that these clients, which in your kind of, I think, view, were a little bit heavy hitters. You weren't expecting to be landing, big companies and clients right out the door. So what was the secret sauce, do you think, that with the culture in the business, or maybe yourself, your personal leadership style, your salesmanship, what is it, do you think, that helped open those doors and got those Whirlpool and Timkins to say, there's a problem we want to solve. We don't know how to solve it, but we trust you and your team to go solve it. How do you get yourself in that position that someone trusts you with that much?
Wow, that's a great question, by the way, and one that we're asked quite a bit, because as we started to grow from those early beginnings, then it was Honda, and then it was Toyota and Mazda, and now it's Cummins and Train, and it has been a litany of the largest companies in the world.
Yep, sure.
It's not like we are a $40 billion company and the match happens immediately, right? That isn't the way that it happened at all. But you used the word that we use often around here, which is trust. When new people come into the company, we give them a selection of books that they need to read. And one of them is a very short book. It's actually an evening's endeavor. And it's called Getting Naked. And really what it teaches everybody that comes in the door is that if you want to develop trust, the first thing you have to be is absolutely honest. And so when we're with a potential client, and in fact, we remain embraced in a relationship with our clients where they're always new clients too, because their dream hasn't stopped. They have a dream that goes on for a while, and they need us to continue to adopt and then adapt and then think of ways together to get them to their dream state. Primarily, the word that we use is trust, because they're not going to take you down that journey with them unless they trust you to sign up, give it your all, and at times invest, right? And tell the truth, because you're going to fail along the way. And it's an iterative process, right? And so we actually take that word that you just brought into the conversation very seriously, because really the difference between who we are and many of the folks that are also in this business, sometimes we see that the difference is, number one, when we sit down, we'll go to a whiteboard and we'll thoroughly understand what the challenge is. And then we have to work very hard to make sure that that client trusts us to get them to their dream state. We absolutely tell them the truth. We just had a client select us out of a number of other companies, and we told them, that we weren't ready to go to China yet. And that was difficult because they were asking for a global platform. And going to China is incredibly important in our relationship. But there is no way that we were going to tell them we were ready to turn on a global platform and to deploy in areas that we weren't prepared to do. And, they selected us anyway, primarily because they knew that we were going to be absolutely open for them. We were going to get naked. And that is a great place to start a trusting relationship. So I agree with the term that you brought in. I think that the reason that we've been so successful with very large companies is that we work very hard to embrace their dream state. We get naked, we build trust, and then we let them know that we're going to build it over time. There's nothing out there right now that satisfies everybody's dream state. So we have to build it together. And they accept us as partners on that journey. And it's really been a lot of fun to be honest with you, because it changes us too. We
Yeah.
become
Yeah.
better, and it's a way to grow. If people say, how do I start from a kitchen table and get to where we are today? That's the prescription. It isn't that it's so complex. I will tell you, it's very difficult to do.
You know what you've described here, if you like my cocktail and you like my ping pong analogies, I got another one for you.
Okay.
This will be the last one I leave you with, okay? So
All right.
after this I start charging. So it's like walking a Saint Bernard is the way that I look at it sometimes. And you're the dog walker. And sometimes you have clients that they are the Saint Bernard pulling you, the dog walker. They are charging forward and you're just trying to hold on, and you're on for the ride, and they're going to pull you along as a vendor and as a partner. And then you've got the Saint Bernard that doesn't want to go on a walk. That's the client that you're having to pull the leash, and you say, let's go, Brutus, we've got to walk, you've got to do this, I need you to do this for me, Brutus. Like you've got that kind of client. And then you've kind of got the happy medium where you've got you and the client, you're both happily walking through the park. You're both kind of exploring together, and you're just having a good old time with it, right? And so I think you either kind of want to be in that hybrid where everyone's moving forward, having a good walk through the park, or when you're the vendor and you can have a client who's that St. Bernard that's pulling you and forcing you to grow and forcing you to upskill and rise to the occasion. That's a great place to be in too. But culturally and company wise, you've got to be in a position to be able to capitalize on that opportunity. If not, that St. Bernard is going to run away.
Right.
So anyway,
Right.
that's the last little bit of imagery I'll leave with you.
Actually, I love that one too. And we look at it as you have to be back in the mindset of the days where you start around the kitchen table, where you're prepared for risk. That a lot of times companies get to the point where they don't want to risk growth, or they don't want to risk profitability, EBITDA, whatever they measure. And so what happens is they try to perform to products in their toolbox. All we really need to do is go find more people that want a wrench and sell more wrenches, right?
Yeah.
It's a gravity that really pulls really hard on a company, particularly because you're gaining people and you're gaining costs, and like I said, it's a gravity that pulls you in, that suggests, really what you need to do is focus and just go sell more of what you do. And I think that's really the opposite of what you should be doing. You should be certain that who you started as being is who you are today. And whether you're in a kitchen table or a boardroom or in front of a client, you have to understand that you have to invest too. And I'm proposing risk, right? But that's part of that dog walking thing. That you have to understand the times that you're going to get pulled. And you have to understand the times you got to pull. because there will be a point in time where you're walking together and really enjoying the day. And
Yeah.
I am going to steal that as well, because many companies only want to think about how they build that one scenario. I want to walk next to the St. Bernard, and I want us both to have a really nice stroll through the park, right?
Hmm.
But that's not what business is. And I would submit that that's one of the hurdles people need to think about in general, particularly in technology, is that you have to embrace risk just as you did when you first started the company. If you don't do that, then really what happens is that you become an artifact,
I was
and
just
maybe
about to
they
say, about to bring up a Blockbuster and a Kodak and a
we
BlackBerry, whatever, all the
yeah,
case studies are out
exactly.
there. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We could talk about logos forever, right?
Sure.
And Kodak at one time was the most recognized brand in the world. Wherever you went would be a kiosk selling everything from film to reusable cameras. And when's the last time you've seen a Kodak?
Bill, man, it was so great to hear the story about how you were able to ping pong yourself up into the position that you're in today to build something tangible and real and provide jobs and solutions. And
Thank you.
I've got to imagine that's such a rewarding experience. In this last minute or two, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you really want to just make sure that we leave the listeners with here before we conclude this episode?
Sure. I will leave you with this. And there's really 2 points, because I'm asked this quite a bit. What do I envision for the near and midterm? I envision optimistic views across industry in general, um, because a lot of people are seeing, a flood of energy going into supply chain and IoT. They're starting to sense a little bit of a neutrality, if not slowdown, but I don't see that at all. What I see is that technology is getting better, the confluence of many different types of technologies, right? We can't live in technology silos anymore, but all of the people that I talk to in industry still have dreams. They still have dreams. I do not see a pessimistic um, end user or anyone I speak to in the industry at all. I see great deals of optimism, not only in supply chain, but in deployed technology. So I would say, number one, we all ought to be really happy that we're in the industry we're in, because there's a lot of headroom that's there and people are asking for a lot of help. So I would leave you with that. I'd also like to say thank you. It's been really been fun to kind of take that stroll down memory lane.
Hmm.
I appreciate the conversation. It's been a lot of fun.
Likewise, likewise. Thanks for coming on for a minute with us today and sharing some of your wisdom and your experience with us. I imagine there's a number of folks that were listening that got some great nuggets of information and inspiration from it. So thanks, Bill, and we'll see you around.
Thank you, Nathan. Can't wait to see you next time.